Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. Great to have you here. If you've come via YouTube and want to know more about what we do, it's really simple. You just head on over to our main web portal, which is officehours.global. That's where you can find more information and links about the show, what happens here, how we do it, and links to other things that can let you interact even more with the show. And speaking of interaction, on the, let's see, I go this way to point at that. That's our QR code that takes you into the modified and more simple kind of phone version of the Office Hours question system. So if you have a question and it comes up and you go, oh, wait, I really like to get this in the show, rather than going through the more robust and full-featured Mukana system, you can just scan that with your phone. It'll take you right into the question queue, type your question in, and then that goes into our back-end crew, and the back-end crew monitors those questions all the time and moves them over into the regular show flow so they get into the graphics and everything. So that is your easiest way to ask the panelists questions during the show. As I always note, it's also important for you to vote on questions because we spend the most time and the most depth on the questions that get the biggest set of votes. So your voting does count. So for everybody who's watching the show, regardless of the platform you're watching it on, if you can get into the voting system, please make your votes count. Today in our second hour, if needed, we're going to be doing another hour of general questions. I say if it's needed because we have enough to easily get us through an hour, and often we grow questions during the course of the show, either using that QR code or just generally putting it in Mukana. And if we have enough content, we will cross the top of the hour for the second hour and do another hour of general questions today. If not, we'll just end the show whenever you kind of run out of questions. That's our second hour. But this is our first hour and regular Q&A. So Mitch, dive in. What is our first question for today?
Thank you, Bill. I'm diving in with our first question from Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida. Is there an automated way to scrape questions from a Slack channel to display in a video composition using Wirecast?
And Samuel Nordvik's going to start us off. Samuel, good to see you. What say you?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I would check out social stream.ninja. It's a website that's made, or it's a service for bringing in comments from a lot of different sites, and Slack is listed up. So I would check out that first and see if you can get into something like H2R graphics, or perhaps Wirecast has you can bring in text directly to Wirecast. So I would check out that first. I know there's a lot of other APIs to Slack, so if that doesn't work, then maybe you can build something yourself, but I would check out that first.
Great. Good advice. Jeffrey Powers?
Yeah, there is a way to go and send. I know you can send stuff from Google Sheets into Slack, but I think you can also do the same thing. So if somebody posts on Slack, it could send off to Google Sheets. You also got to remember that this is a more secure environment, so it depends on how you have your Slack set up.
So your level of security might impact whether you succeed or not in this. Makes sense. Let's go to the next question.
From Kyle Hammond of Chicago, Illinois, what would be the requirements to set up a 24/7 meeting similar to After Hours? Share any tips and tricks?
Oh, it's so simple. It's just on your phone. No, Laura Thompson.
Okay, you didn't say what type of requirements you're asking about. So the first thing I would say is you need people. You need moderators and people that are gonna, because every 26 hours, every 25, 26 hours, the meeting has to be reset. And that takes somebody being there with the ability to do that. I know After Hours uses a multitude of ways to do that. I've helped with that process, and it can be sometimes quite manual.
Yeah, I was being utterly facetious. There is a huge endeavor behind what you see here on the show, and we always want to take a moment and just say thank you to every unsung hero and heroine and everybody else in the back end who is making this all work. Those of us that you see on the screen are just the tip of the spear here, definitely, and huge amounts of volunteer effort by highly competent people go into this. It's just a pleasure to be able to work with them every day. Mitch, your thoughts?
I think you guys covered it well. It takes a village to make it happen, and the cooperation of the people participating. And I do like when Brian Shan does the reset early in the morning, our time here in the U.S. It's sometimes a interesting countdown down to 0 hour when it gets flipped over for the next 24 hours.
Yeah, particularly in the way that we do things here, much of it is automated, but people have to watch that automation and tune it up and make sure that it continues. It's not just a set and forget process. However, there are more tools, and if you've been around the show forever, you know that we expose all of those tools to anybody who wants to learn about them. So if you're interested in all this kind of subsets, Isadora, one of the control protocols we use behind the point, we actually have sessions where you can come in with, I know Elle does the Isadora ones, and he will explain everything that he's doing. So if you're looking to learn this kind of stuff, I don't think there's a better resource on the web right now than the Office Hours community. Come be a part of it, and you will learn a bunch. Let's go to the next question.
Ryan Hildebrandt from Mission Viejo, California. What are the long-term prospects for consumer acceptance of personalized marketing brand messaging using AI voice synthesis, video avatars, and deep fakes? Will these continue to delight, or will they fatigue set in quickly?
We got a lot of expertise in this subject. We're going to start with Nigel DeSau. Nigel?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure they're delighting at the moment. I think they're entertaining at the moment. The reality with all this sort of technology is when it gets introduced, we see, the parameters of it swing violently left to right. We see the very best and we see the very worst. And over time, the oscillation of that pendulum slows and gets to somewhere in the middle where if the tool is being used to help you, you will like it. And if the tool has no value to you, you won't. And anyone who spent, an hour and a half on the phone with AT&T or, someone like that would welcome a virtual tool that could actually solve their problems.
Amen to that. Courtney, your thoughts?
Well, I think it may start out, excuse me, if popular or interesting, and it'll probably move to hated very quickly. I thought of an interesting aspect. I've got a 55-year high school reunion coming up. Wouldn't it be interesting to use AI and take the photos of us, our class photos from the annual, and animate them and deepfake them so that we have promos done by ourselves in the from 55 years ago? That would be interesting. The problem with all these AI messaging, targeted messaging to individuals is that it kind of ends serendipitous discovery. You may never find out that you actually like, mouse taxidermy or extreme flower arranging, because if you haven't done it before, you may never see any ads for that.
Who doesn't like mouse taxidermy? I'm confused by that. On your point, though, it was interesting when you said that. I thought that another thing would be interesting is have AI take your 20-year-old photo and age it to your 55th anniversary, and then have a shot of what it thought versus what you really are, and see how close it got. That'd be interesting. John Preto, you have tons of expertise in this area, so
I agree with my two fellow panelists of what has been said for. This is funny because on our 40th reunion, which was last year, I did Love Children. So I took the people that were the prettiest eyes and all that stuff, and then I aggregated them together and made Love Children. That was a big hit at our reunion. So you can do a lot of that fun stuff. Yeah. So exactly what Nigel says. It's going to oscillate between, right now it's either great or it's horrible, and it's gonna minimize logarithmically down. Think about Blade Runner when he walks into Terrell's office with what's her name, and they said, "Is that a real owl?" "No, I can't afford a real owl." That's what's going to happen. It's going to be supply and demand, and then you're going to have neo-Luddites like Chris Fenwick that won't accept any AI at all. But the majority of the stuff out there will all be deepfake stuff.
I think Chris is more a faux neo-Luddite. I'm not sure he believes somebody. Anyway, Mitchell Hill, your thoughts?
Yeah, I feel the neo-Luddites require a representation. Since Chris is not here today on the show, so I'll be one of them. Take any great new technology like AI and subvert it for your use. Telemarketers come to mind. They're already doing it. Have you had a conversation yet with a computer voice that seems to have an answer for everything you say? I mean, everything you say. That's the example of it. So I think we're headed for trouble, because where are we going to get our information from? In other words, how are we going to be able to tell if this is the truth or some kind of Terminator voice talking to us in our ear? It's just going to go crazy. So cats and dogs living together, it's just going to be weird stuff.
Jeffrey Powers, you just popped in.
Yeah, I want to answer that too. What Mitch is saying, for everything that's going to be happening AI-wise, there's going to be something that's countering it. Like, for instance, deepfakes. They're already building software that can identify anything that would be a deepfake. And then you would see, if it posted up, let's say today on Facebook, Tom Hanks as Iron Man will just do that. To identify it as a deepfake, there's going to be software that's going to come in and take a look at the pixels and then determine it as a deepfake, and then do exactly what they do with fake stories and things like that. So AI is going to have that teeter-totter effect where there's going to be another end that's going to help counter the bad stuff out and filter it out, so you don't even see it half the time.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing. This is an extraordinarily powerful technology, and I think we're all struggling with where is it going to fit in culture and life and the rest of that. I always just, to me, even the best, most potentially positive thing, if the people who get a hold of it first and use it are just oriented like, what does this do for me? How can I make money? How can I get more power? How can I do something? That almost always goes wrong. The people who grab a hold of the same technology and say, how can I use this to help all of us, usually really do advance society. So I think we're on there is a balance beam here, and we're watching it, just exactly as Nigel said, move back and forth as everybody explores this. Let's all keep our fingers crossed that it ends up in the we category as much or more than in the me category, because I think that'll help society a lot. It's a powerful set of technologies. Let's go to the next question.
Jason Dorman from Cincinnati, Ohio, asking, what would be the proper specs to be for a Mac that would run ZoomISO and up to 8 HD feeds from a DeckLink Quad 2 and a Sonnet enclosure into an ATEM?
Mitchell Hill, you want to take a swing at this?
Yeah. We've already tested it extensively right here. An M1 Mac will do the job exactly as you describe it with no hiccups. So that's a testament to the Silicon Macs and not having to upgrade to an M2 to be able to make that happen.
Yeah, I concur. It's really interesting. That was a leap in processor efficiency and technology and low power and everything else. And I'm surprised. I think a lot of people are still in that, you have to spend a lot and get a bespoke system in order to do high-end work. I think computers in general, I think this is on both the Mac and PC side, have gotten so strong that even base units can do a lot of what used to be very high-end sophisticated work, just because there's been so much advancement in that. Jeffrey Powers, you had some thoughts?
If you do get the base Mac, the best thing to do is to get the 10 gig NIC inside and actually get the improved 16 gigabytes of RAM inside. But definitely, if you can spring for an M2, get an M2.
Yeah, it's really interesting. In my voice booth, I have an M2 little Mac Air, and I just compare its power, speed, efficiency to even desktop computers I had 7, 6, 5 years ago, and it just runs rings around them. And so the industry, and again, I'm not saying it's only Macs that do that. The Mac migration to silicon with the M-series chips was a big watershed moment. I'm sure all the other chip foundries are doing exactly the same thing now, or trying to get as close to it as possible. And so it's benefited everyone. Computers are amazing these days. Let's go to the next question.
And it's from Chester Sweeney, the third, from Las Vegas, Nevada. And it looks like this is from yesterday's second hour. How about a show on the website for the remotes and other music projects which is made for?
And Jeffrey is a part of the band. So, Jeffrey?
Yeah, well, the remotes we've been working on. We've been working on one song, and we're still working on it. It's a fun, but we've got day jobs type project. So there'll definitely be something to make it in a regular segment. I don't think that's a possibility, but it doesn't hurt to have people on and find people that can help build the song and then create second hours from that. But yeah, that's something that could definitely be thought of.
If you're interested in music and you want to explore it, volunteering for and becoming part of the Office Hours band, I can't tell you, I haven't done much with them in the last couple of years just because I've been so freaking busy. But I will tell you that the time I spent with them, I learned more about the practical aspects of taking something that is good in the music process and how much effort and time and expertise and attention to detail goes into making it great. And it was just a revelation. We have some amazing people that work on these projects with us. And I came away from the project feeling like I just expanded my understanding of that world by multiple times. It was fascinating. So if you're interested, raise your hand. Jeffrey and other people in the band, Office Hours band, work with them. They're great people. Let's go to the next question.
From Jonas Dattel from Stuttgart, Germany. This is very cool. 1.4 million people are watching this charity live stream on YouTube. Maybe we should do a second hour on influencer live streaming.
That's interesting. I had not known that this was happening, but 1.4 million people watching live. That, now you're getting up into broadcast television numbers and certainly past cable and things like that. So we knew this was going to happen. Eyeballs were migrating more and more to watching things via the internet and on your computer as opposed to just being stuck in the broadcast streams. And every piece of statistics I know indicates that that is happening. Courtney, you have a thought about this?
Well, if you look at it, it's a soccer match. And, millions of people watch soccer matches, and it's a charity soccer match. So, of course, it's going to be popular. So I don't think this is an unusual amount of people watching a stream, but certainly if it's well promoted and well advertised, it can certainly draw a lot of viewers online.
No shortage of football fans around the planet, as we see. So cool. Next question.
Paul Wallace from Austin, Texas asked, how do you organize all your little dongles and USB sticks?
Mitch, I'm going to start with you, and then we're going to go to Courtney, Laura, and Samuel. So, Mitch, take it away.
My answer is simple. Tupperware.
What word? I think people can be a little more sophisticated than that. Courtney, what say you?
Don't get a Macintosh because you won't need dongles, and because they have all the ports you need. But in reality, I use these Amazon Basics mini PC. They're designed for netbook bags. Amazon Basics, and they've got a little pocket, and I use a pouch, and I keep one for just streaming sticks and additional add-ons and cables. So it's kind of an AKS case for all of my cables and dongles and stuff that I need on the road.
Laura Thompson.
I actually use a product I picked up off of MacBreak Weekly from Andy and Otco called Cocoons, and with the gridded cocoons, and they're just little flat with elastic straps that you can slide around and customize, and they've really become very helpful. I know right where to go to get what I need.
Nice. Samuel Nordvik.
Yeah, well, I use this here case here. It's like for tools, and I have like a lot of extra cables and adapters and stuff that I take with events. And it's actually very useful when I'm out on events. Like I've been saved several times because there's like one thing I don't have, and then I have it in here. So it's very practical.
Perfect. John Preto.
Paul, the Dalai Lama says to get rid of all your worldly possessions and you'll be free in life.
You'll be free, but the show won't get on the air. Unfortunately, we do need some worldly possessions to this. This is tough. For me, I've kind of developed a two-tiered strategy. And here's, if it's a thing, a dongle, a cord that is specific to a piece of equipment, particularly if there's more than one thing in that class, like let's say I have a camcorder and it has a special tap out for some reason, and I must have that tap for the system to work the way I use it. I will try to bundle all those things into a kit for that camera, and I'm not going to put it in with my general stuff. On the other hand, I have general stuff that, oh, here are my HDMI cables, and I can use them for 10 different things. I always know I need 3 or 4. I need the big full-size HDMI to the mini HDMI. I need a short HDMI. I need a long HDMI. Maybe I need one that has an additional power thing or something like that. In those cases, if it's a generic cable, I have a couple of different ways I handle them. But usually I try to find some totable, field-safe thing to put those in by class. And I say that because if you've done production for any length of time, there's just so many little things you need that if you don't follow the old advice, a place for everything and everything in its place, there is absolutely nothing worse than getting to a shoot, having things exactly the way you want them out front, but for the lack of that one specialist dongle that you didn't put in there, you can't get the signal to flow where it needs to go. That is just awful, unacceptable, unprofessional. So you got to figure out a way to organize all your little stuff. It's a good question, Paul. Mitchell, thoughts?
Yeah, I would say why stop at dongles? Why not go to your SD cards? This is a Pelican case, 0915, that keeps all my SD cards together, good or bad. And 0915, handy dandy. Not going to lose stuff.
I have a couple of those laying around as well. Although I think my first one is for old compact flash cards, the big ones. So it morphs over time. And as you graduate out of equipment one class and move to the next class, sometimes you have to buy new holders for the new stuff because it's smaller or lighter or different, whatever. Let's go to the next question.
Jack Ruppel from Breckenridge, Colorado, has a question. In anticipation of a new iPhone release Tuesday, what amount of storage is recommended? Does USB ports make this moot? Planning on working with Gaussian Splatting, Photogrammetry and NeRFs. Love NeRFs.
NeRFs. John Preto.
It's a very good question. The USB port's not going to make that much of a difference. It's going to make it great for getting stuff off. But what I've done historically, and this is changing now, it's been linear. I look to see how much storage I've used in my last iPhone. I've upgraded every year, and then I double that amount to buy the new one. But if you're doing photogrammetry and NeRFs on this new phone, and I've seen some amazing photogrammetry and NeRF apps out there on Twitter, it's going to be really, really cool. I would do my estimation and then probably double or triple that amount, or possibly get the highest. The highest
you're
one
going to do a lot of that
work,
work,
which is what, 1 terabyte now? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe max time. I think it might even be 2 terabytes. And most of the Apple stuff that is 1 terabyte has moved to 2. Nigel, your thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to say a similar thing. If you can afford it, get the largest amount you can. But I guess the other question is, how do you use your iPhone? Because if you're always somewhere close to your machine, your host or your main Mac, then you can plug in the USB and copy it across. If you're out for 3 days on the road and you're doing all of that stuff and you don't have that ability, then you're going to have to get the most amount of memory you can afford. I do think on the iPhone question, if there's a surprise this year, I think it's something around the USB. I love the fact that Apple can take something that is a disadvantage and turn it into an advantage. And they did it with, the zone at the top of the phone where the pill they managed to make sound sexy. I wonder what they're going to do with USB. So I'm interested to see whether they can find a way of being made to do the USB-C into something else. And it wouldn't surprise me if we have a new cable with a new name or something, or a new service that really makes everyone go, well, why didn't everybody else do that?
Jeffrey Powers.
Cable, no, because the whole idea of, and because Apple's been very vocal about this, they don't want to change to USB-C. They want to stay with the Lightning. But the problem with the USB-C is, will that USB-C be a USB 2.0? Will it be 3.0? Will it be Thunderbolt? It's all dependent on that speed, because the one thing they were talking about is if they move to 8K photos, for example, and you're trying to transfer those 8K videos and photos off using a USB 2.0 technology, that's going to take forever to do. So if that USB-C is just basically for basic transfer or charging, things like that, then the USB-C is going to be pretty much worthless. The two other features that are being rumored on there, the one thing is the Qualcomm chips are still going to be in these phones because Apple's making a wireless chip, but it's not ready yet. So the 15, it won't happen in the 15. The 16 will probably have it. And the other thing is that UWB connection for when the Vision Pro comes out, so they can connect that up. So with those things, I think that what they're going to be focusing on mostly is things like AirDrop, being able to transfer your files to iCloud, and that's the types of speeds where you would then take that off your phone. As for storage, there's going to be up to a 2 terabyte model. So if you really want to be on the safe side, that's the one you want to get, but you're going to have to pay for it.
Courtney Gooden.
Yeah, I've always, you could buy an Android phone that has, micro SD card in it, and stick a 2 terabyte micro SD removable memory in there. But it's not known whether or not that USB-C will be USB-C host compliant. So you could plug something like a 2 terabyte NVMe drive into it and record directly onto your small external drive like this, which you could stick on the back of the phone, and maybe even mount in a gimbal if you're going to use it for acquisition, for acquiring those photogrammetry or 8K videos, if it's even possible. So that remains to be seen. It's in the spec for USB-C, but whether they support it or not in host mode, and whether the battery can handle, powering an external device like this is questionable too.
All things to think about. Hopefully that helped you. Remember, this show is driven by your questions, which means putting your questions in helps us program the show, literally. So we had the QR code up earlier, and that's one way to get into the system. But the other way is to go through the regular Mukana interface, and that really provides you some pluses. Not the least of which is that if you go into the Mukana system, that is live every day during the show, and there is a robust and really informative chat that happens there. People talk about the things that we're talking about on the show, so it's a great little community to kind of get to talk about some of the topics in more depth that we discuss here at Office Hours. So that is something you should look into. At the Mukana interface, you can find it through the website. But get your questions in and vote on those questions. Let's go to the next question.
Here's a question coming in on our QR code way. Chester Sweeney III in Las Vegas, Nevada. Since the early episodes of Conversations with Tony Mobley, I thought maybe I could make a short theme song to open the show. Is Tony into this idea?
Tony is a very open guy, so I would check with him. Jeffrey Powers, what say you?
Yeah, absolutely. Tony would love any and all help he can get. That's for sure. For those of you who don't know, I actually helped with his YouTube for the first couple of years of the show. So yeah, the theme song that's in there is basically a stock theme song. So if they don't have to pay for that stock theme song, then that's just one added feature. So I would contact Tony directly. I think Tlaloc is also still working with Tony Mobley Show, but don't quote me on that. And you can probably contact them and say, hey, here's a song, and yeah.
Laura Thompson.
This could not have come up at a better time. We are in a rebuild project with Tony's show, and yes, Tlaloc is still helping with Tony's show and helping us produce it. So yeah, reach out to Tony, reach out to any of us that are on the crew. And if you can't get directly to Tony, and we can talk about it.
It's one of the magical parts of Office Hours is that if you're looking for real life hands-on experience in doing this kind of stuff on the web, you can volunteer your efforts and meet a lot of really nice people and get a lot of practical experience. And again, I know it's expanded my understanding of webcasting and everything else that we do around here, all the technologies that I wouldn't have run across in my normal video practice, particularly the IT stuff, which is part and parcel of the entire new kind of broadcasting era. Wouldn't know half as much if I hadn't been here and working with other people and listening to them. So I highly recommend it. Let's go to the next question.
Gregory Wheeler from Ellicott City. What is the difference between an SDI 12G cable and an SDI 3G cable. Will I notice a difference with a Blackmagic SDI to HDMI bi-directional converter?
Got a lot of help here. We're going to start with Courtney Gooden. Courtney?
Well, probably not, because you're probably not sending 8K video more than about a foot or so over to hook up that converter. The difference is between the cables is usually the dielectric which is the white stuff on the inside of the cable that you strip off, is thicker, and the shielding is better. So it has a lower impedance and better shielding to allow higher frequency transmission down longer cables. And so usually you'll see that the 12 gig SDI cables are considerably thicker than the 3G SDI cables. So they can get very thick and very stiff and a little tough to deal with. So keep that in mind if you're planning on sending a lot of 12G signals around, 4K or 8K signals, any length, any distance at all. Bear that in mind. Cables are going to take up a lot more space in your cases.
John Preto, what say you?
This is a very interesting question. I worked for a company that certified Ethernet cable, and you could find all the characteristics of the cable, articulated out. I spent about 15 minutes searching for the differences in the cable, exactly what Courtney said. So the changes are in AC impedance, so they would be less in the 12 gig, which means the frequency is higher, and it's got less AC resistance, which is called impedance on AC. And shorter distances as well. So I was dumbfounded that I couldn't find more information on this question.
Interesting. Mitchell, your thoughts?
Yeah, perhaps, Gregory, there may be no difference if it's a short cable, because it really doesn't matter going into your converter, as Courtney said. John brings up an interesting point. Impedance is basically how the the electronics or the electrical signal pushes back against the signal coming in. So the less impedance you have, the longer the cable can be, which means that's why it's got to be a bigger RG6, would it be, Courtney? If you're going to use that kind of yeah.
You're getting a big nod. RG6 cable. All right, next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas asks, Ming-Chi Kuo from Apple no longer plans to launch any MacBook models with an M3 chip before the end of this year. Why the delay?
And that's what he's saying. And he's a noted analyst who keeps a very sharp eye on the pulse of what Apple is planning on doing. Nigel, what say you?
I think there's about 1,000 different thoughts here. First of all, I don't think Apple normally does the Pros by the end of the year. I think the last set were done in January or February, so it's not unusual for them to shift. The reality for a laptop supplier, be it Apple, be it PC, you want your lineup right, really in first quarter, because you're about to go into the federal government and the corporate buying cycle. You want things on the list. So the focus is to get it done in first quarter. The second thing I would tell you is I doubt the basic thesis of this question. I doubt that Apple has decided to delay something like this, because delaying a line like this is a very, very expensive thing, because it's about parts, it's about synchronization, it's about keeping other products on the line. And if you make that decision, you have to make it so much further ahead than almost the quarter you're in, because you'd have to keep the existing products running, you'd have to change manufacturing lines. It's a very, very complicated thing. I suspect the rumors have changed, which is really what this is about, because I suspect Apple probably hasn't changed its plan very much. The other thing I would say to you is, if you look at the Apple lineup, it's finally starting to get fairly coherent in the MacBook, not don't think yet in the iPad line, where the Air is really N-1 in terms of the chip. The Pro is the N. So you've got to think about not only what you do with the Pros, but what you do with the Airs and how you align the products down. And nobody knows how many M1 or M2s they've got manufactured. They're still being manufactured by TSMC. What's in the bins? Nobody knows that except Apple. And this is a very complicated problem for them. And I suspect they're on the plan they were always on.
Jeffrey Powers.
So if the rumor is true, it's all about that 3 nanometer chip. And from what I've been reading is that TSMC is what they could only produce so many chips. So they had to basically choose what devices that they could do the chips into. So if this is true, then there is going to probably be no additional Apple event coming in October, and which is going to be very odd. Just as Nigel said, you run into a lot of very expensive and very distraught audience because they won't see anything until WWDC anyway. But there's still iPads that still have to come out, which I don't think are going to be coming out this week, and that could probably fill up the October event anyway.
Yeah, it's really interesting. These chips are getting so small. 3 nanometers is almost unimaginable. It does provide a lot of, I understand, advantages in terms of power and the fact that you don't have the chips are lighter, smaller, and even faster at the same time. So it's that weird triangle where you're kind of getting. They won't be cheap, but they'll certainly be good and fast. Nigel, you had additional thoughts? I know you know this.
I was just going to tell you, two additional thoughts. Be a little aware when people say 3 nanometers, they really mean 3 nanometers. Both TSMC and Intel have started naming things that sound better than actually the physics that are underneath it. So don't take that for...
You say it might be 3.7 and...
Yeah, or 5.5 or something. But the other thing is, I remember I lived in this world for a while in a chip manufacturer, and I remember talking to a chip scientist about whether the speed of light would be the limiting factor on how small you could make a chip. And he looked at me and he said, we solved that problem a long time ago.
So maybe the popular imagination doesn't understand anywhere near the sophistication of the modern technology. All I know is that devices that I'm buying for far less money are smaller, lighter, and have way more power than anything I worked with in the first 10 years of my career. So it's been a boon to most of us who need to do this kind of work, if nothing else. Let's move on to the next question.
Chester Sweeney III from Las Vegas, Nevada is back. Was Sin City the last movie to use prosthetics, or is it just a lot less common with HD films?
Oh, I think there's a lot of subtle prosthetics out there you probably don't see. Courtney, what say you? You're on sets a lot.
Yeah, there is a lot less prosthetics. Prosthetics have gotten a lot better since the old days of foam latex back in the 90s. They're using silicone now, and it blends in much easier. It looks more realistic. It even has pores in it. But you're right. Because of the higher resolution of cameras and the higher resolution of projection and screens, it's really a lot harder to hide a prosthetic makeup unless it's just background characters. And they still use it a lot on background characters that don't have any close-ups for Mr. DeMille. But they're getting so good with deepfakes these days and aging and anti-aging using CGI that I think the days of prosthetic makeup are numbered, as can be seen in the latest Indiana Jones movie where they had to de-age Harrison Ford considerably to do a lot of scenes. And it looks fairly believable, much more believable than probably trying to put prosthetics to make somebody look younger. That's a lot harder to do.
Although, interestingly enough, I've been reading a bit about Maestro, the movie coming out next year about Leonard Bernstein, the famous conductor, and Bradley Cooper, who plays him, wears a prosthetic nose. And it caused all sorts of difficulty. There was a lot of kerfluffle about it. All the reviews I've read since then from people who have actually seen the cut of the movie says that's not an issue. It's a brilliant movie, and it deeply dives into him, and Bradley Cooper does a fabulous job of pulling off the character. But, there we are. We're back to using the traditional, no, we're going to enhance the nose to make him more like the character using traditional old-school Hollywood technology. Courtney?
Also, I think I didn't mention is when an actor gets made up in prosthetics and they see themselves in the mirror, it's easier for them to assume the character if they really look like the character. And so what they may do is use prosthetics on the set and then just use CGI to smooth it out or make it look better or completely replace it in post-production. But to give them and the other actors on the set the feeling that, they're talking to Einstein instead of Alfred Molina dressed up as Einstein.
That makes perfect sense. I can see that being a boon to everybody on set. Let's go to the next question.
From Sean Johnson in New York, I've been given a smart servo motor with a light sensor by a friend poking for interesting projects to do with my kids. Any suggestions? I don't even know that I have a Raspberry Pi or an Arduino. Can anyone tell from the pics? Thanks in advance.
And people are going to help you here. Let's start with Courtney. Courtney?
I didn't get a chance to look closely at the pics, but it looks like it's just got a regular DC servo that would be used in remote control, RC planes and things like that, and a light sensor on it. And there used to be things like this back in Radio Shack. Used to make things with like a flashlight controlled car that you'd shine the light on it and steer it by which direction you move the flashlight on the front of the car. So you could use it for something like that. Or you could use it to create a little robotic head that turns and follows you around the room to creep out your parents and friends. There's a lot of different projects you could use with a light sensitive control of a servo.
I still think it looks like something Roadrunner and Coyote would use to blow up the trail. But anyway, Jeffrey Powers. So
the only thing that I can recognize on here is that front display. It's just basically a simple holder for like a 1.3 inch monitor. Those can be put into Raspberry Pis. Those can be put into Arduinos. What you probably have there is what's called a stacked PCB. So you have the board behind it, and then another level with that was basically soldered together by somebody to give you all those buttons and dials and everything like that. The size of the board would make me think that you have an Arduino Uno in there because it's square rather than rectangular. If it was rectangular, then it could be a Raspberry Pi, but the Unos are pretty inexpensive, so I would guess that's the board you have inside. But we won't know until you open it up. We see the back of it. And it'll probably say right on the board what it is.
Samuel.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is a 3D printed case enclosure, but it's probably Arduino, I would assume. What I can recommend, if you want to build a project, you can Google what project you want to build. There's several sites that post them, for example, Instructables. I would also recommend that if you're planning to build a project, that you would look at Tinkercad. It's a simulator that you can build your circuits and simulate them first before you build them, because it's a lot easier to connect it on the simulator before you start building it in real life with all the cables and soldering and everything.
And once again, you are programming the show, so if you put more questions in, we will go longer today. If you don't, we will probably finish up at the top of the hour or immediately thereafter. So just giving you a heads-up warning. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas asks, Roblox announces Roblox Connect, letting users video chat with other people as their Roblox avatar in a shared virtual space. It's available later in 2023. Comments?
It is Roblox is a gigantic user community, particularly focused on young people. I think teens, preteens, and even a little bit younger perhaps. And it's an environment where you can build and connect characters and things like that. It's really kind of as much a social media site than anything. So I'm not at all surprised that their users are interested in more connection in the same way that many social media sites are. More connection and video chat adding to that is probably going to serve their users well. How much it's a big thing. There are millions of people using the Roblox system. So if you don't have kids, you probably wouldn't know about it. But if you do, you might well. And so I'm going to assume, I have never been on there, having no kids at this point. My son's way beyond that age. At this point, I'm assuming that since it's been going for so long, they must do a pretty good job of privacy and security and the things that any teen and preteen website would do. So if they manage to put those things in place and add video chat, I'm sure the kids and others who are there will probably really enjoy that. Let's move on to the next question.
From Jonas Dattel from Stuttgart, what are you all most interested in or excited about at IBC?
Oh, man, so much to go here. I'm going to start with Mitch Hill, go to John, Courtney, and Jeffrey. So, Mitch, dive in.
I guess my quick answer would be a different perspective because I'm used to NAB, and of course, a lot of companies have to come here in order to show their wares. The good thing about going to IBC in Amsterdam at the RAI is that I'll get to see the latest from Ari, the latest from Sennheiser, Neumann. All my European favorites will be right there and very likely to make their big announcements. So that's what I'm excited about.
John Preto.
I'm due the ATEM 4K switcher. I'm ready for that with SDI and HDMI both built in it. But I'm more importantly, Jonas, I want to see you and John Barker drinking beer together in Amsterdam.
Yes, we will have a crew on the show floor. I'll talk more about that in a moment. Courtney.
Isn't Sony rumored to be introducing a new Venice type camera, cinema camera that's coming out
yes.
at IBC? So that'd be interesting to look at. And I agree with John. I think ATEM is long overdue. Blackmagic is long overdue for introduction of some new products because they've kind of been laying back. In Cinegear, we didn't really see anything new. And even at NAB, there wasn't a whole lot of improvement other than the one-piece switcher. So I'm looking forward to see if they're going to come up with something new that's in our, that my pocketbook can afford as opposed to the Sony Venice.
Yeah, that probably will be pretty expensive. It looks like a pretty amazing camera. Jeffrey Powers.
Been having a lot of conversation over this in the last week. For those of you who don't know, earlier this week, VisRT did some shuffling, and TriCaster is no more. It's all called VisRT Group now. So with that, they also announced that NDI will stay a separate company during this whole shift in the name. So this is NDI's first opportunity to do something, and I think their big thing is they're going to promote multi-channel audio in their NDI structure there to really compete with Dante and the Dante AV. So I think there's going to be a big battle over IP in the next month because you have IBC coming next week, and then you have NAB New York coming, the third week of October. So there's many opportunities for that. As for Blackmagic, I have a feeling they're going to have their own event, and then they're going to show their products afterwards. So we haven't heard or seen anything from Blackmagic right now. We probably won't see or hear anything new at IBC.
And for those of you who are interested, we are going to be doing extensive coverage of IBC here on the show, including, I believe, it's still in the cards, a regular show entirely from the floor of IBC coming up next week. I don't know which date at this point. It's not here. I know I was talking to Jonas the other day. He was on the show. He was talking about some of what that group, our European counterpart of office hours, or the European team, members who come into office hours from Europe. But it sounds like people are traveling, they're gathering equipment, they're going to try to do essentially what we do they will do it because we have a ton of technical expertise. They will be broadcasting live from the show floor at IBC. So at the tail end of the hour today, you will see the promotional ad give you a little flavor for what IBC looks like. It's in Amsterdam, which is a beautiful city, and so we may get a little look at around Amsterdam, and we will spend some significant time on the show floor talking to the people who are producing this new technology. So should be a great week coming up for that. Let's go to the next question.
Chester Sweeney III from Las Vegas, Nevada, asking, on the sound devices MixPre 3, there's a stereo out and a headphone out. Is there a difference, and why?
Courtney, what say you?
I think the difference is routing. And also, I think there might be some requirements for ear protection that put a limiter on headphone outputs that you can usually turn off to prevent you from damaging your hearing. There's some consumer electronics, whether or not they adhere to that consumer electronics requirement to protect hearing on a headphone output, I don't know. But the routing is different, and the unbalanced, mini plug line output is pretty much the same signal, but you can route things differently to it inside in the routing.
Okay, hopefully that was helpful, Chester. Let's go to the next question.
Jeff Cohen from Miami Beach, Florida. Jeff asks, best app to create audiograms for social media video, ideally the most flexible visual design options.
So I don't do a lot of this. I've used it as an effect in a couple of things, and I believe by audiograms, I'm guessing, but tell me if you think I'm wrong, that you're talking about the display of waveforms or we see a lot of the bouncing meters for audiograms, and I think that's what you're talking about. If so, a lot of special packages on the back end that run either on Mac or on PC programs allow you to visualize the audio and look at it. We did it for one of the, I did it for my video for one of the office hours remotes band things. I had a little audiogram at the bottom that just gave you a visual idea of what was being created as it was being created. They're really fun to watch. Let you watch audio content. If I'm not mistaken, usually I found it to be a plug-in running in something that I'm running traditionally. I think I got mine from VFX plugins on the Mac side, but I'm sure there's plenty of things available on the PC side as well. Courtney, your thoughts about this?
Well, not participating in social media very much. I'm not an expert by any means. There is, however, I think I found one, Canva makes a tutorial on how to create audiograms with Canva. And it goes through step by step on, how to choose a template. They have templates available. You grab sound bites from your audio editor, you select a template, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And Bob's your uncle. And you have something you can post on your social media. But Canva, you might look there because they have a step-by-step process on how to create them.
I will say, as you just saw from that, I took the waveforms that were done on white and just used a Luma key, knocked out the background, changed the shape of it. Those kind of things are pretty easy to do in just your nonlinear editor once you've captured the content that you want in terms of a live video stream of the audiogram reacting to the sound in real time as much as you're going to use in your program. So I didn't do it live, but in those cases, it's you use your basic NLE creator skills to customize what the audiogram thinks that it should look like. And it wasn't terribly difficult. Courtney Gooden, you want to follow up?
Is it? Well, I'm not sure if I'm interpreting audiogram correctly or you are. It seems from this description of this Canva thing that it takes the audio of spoken word and translates it into text and then presents that text in sync, kind of like closed captioning with a style, with a style that's only text displayed on the screen that highlights each text, kind of like you would see at a karaoke bar, each word highlighted as it's spoken as you're listening to it, or words appear and animate based, just to keep it interesting as you hear the dialogue being spoken on the text.
Maybe that's what they're talking about. I was a little leery there too. Mitch, do you have further clarification or know what he's specifically
I'm not going to clarify. I'm just going to throw another idea out there. I know in After Effects, there's a character animation functionality that will take audio in and move the mouth accordingly, a la Clutch Cargo, I guess. And Bob's your uncle.
Oh, there you go. So whichever way you're going, Jeff, put in more information if you want us to try to drill down more. If it was lookupable and if it's built into Canva, which is a very popular content creators program, then maybe that's the standard use of it. Let's go to the next question.
Chester Sweeney III from Las Vegas, Nevada. What are some best practices for using your iPhone 14 Pro to shoot someone when they're grilling outside at a party?
Mitchell Hill.
Avoid the enfuego.
Do not melt your phone or case is usually step number one. It makes a very bad hamburger substitute. You will not enjoy that. I would say, so what were the top three things, the best practices? Okay, I'll start you out. If you're ever shooting with your phone and you don't do it a lot, the first thing you want, these modern phones have great stability, but I still use a two-handed grip on my phone, and I keep my elbows tucked into my body because that helps stabilize the phone. If you're out here, you tend to be less stable. Again, I've just learned I try to pan with my torso as opposed to panning with my hands. I try to start out with as much stability in my holding and operating of the phone as I can, and then I let the stabilization enhance that, and you can usually end up with very smooth and interesting moves. Other best practices, coverage. do wide shots to establish the scene. Here we are at the grill. Here's the party decorations to the west. Do medium shots to say here's the person at the grill, and do close-ups to get down there and zoom in. Don't hold your phone over the fire. That's a bad idea. But find an angle that you can zoom into it so you don't melt the phone at the same time you do that. Those are kind of some just basic best practices for using your phone to shoot anybody doing anything. Jeffrey Powers, you have some more suggestions?
Yeah, well, it also depends on if you're doing vertical or horizontal video. Notice where the camera is, if you got it here, if you got it here. If you do the salt maneuver, the whole salt maneuver with the phone, always try to have my phone like this, so you have a nice fulcrum in the middle, and of course you put your fingers down, and it keeps for a nice stable environment with the elbow tucked in, as Bill just said. And then you can use that kind of like a little jib right there and move it around, and then you can do a little bit of shifting really easy with your phone from there. If you're doing it from here, you can have a nice handle on the phone. That's why I kind of like the little lanyard that I have on my phone, because then I can wrap it around my wrist, so I can really keep my hand as nimble as possible. And then if you've got a watch, the watch will do all the starts and stops, and your nose really works really well for hitting the button.
So one last thing. The thing that I enjoy about this kind of hold, and I tend to hold my phone with both hands, is that if you keep your fingers away from the grip, then you're going to be doing a lot of work on the interface of your phone. You can zoom, you can pull back, you can start and stop by just using the finger on top, because you have both of these fingers available for operating the phone while you're holding. So that's my traditional grip, 3 fingers on each of the top corners, a thumb underneath, and that allows me, it feels natural to me now, so I shoot all my iPhone stuff that way. So just general stuff that those of us who do a lot of shooting with phones have learned. Let's go to the next question.
David Brady from New York, has a question. I have a stack of old iPads and iPod Touches that are kneecapped at older versions of iOS. Rather than e-waste them, what are some creative uses of these things, and how can you load up old versions of applications?
Nigel, start us off.
Yeah, I used to have a thing called a Sinclair ZX80, I think it was, which was a very old PC, but it was like wedge shape. And I found that very good for jamming a door open, because you could get it under. And I think some of those old iPads could probably hold doors open if you just jam them under well enough. That aside, I think one of the uses I see people do is, and again, this is going to depend on how old it is and the software levels. And it's really hard to get old ones, particularly less, you can find versions of the OS. Finding versions of apps is harder. I know what lots of people do is in homes where they use home automation, they take old iPads and they make them effectively panels for people to use. So that they put shortcuts, they put scenes on them. And then when someone comes into the house, or if someone who's not as technically savvy on their phone has a very simple interface to use to open the shades, turn on the lights, do those sorts of things. So think about the automations in your home and your office. Think about ways to make it easier for people to use the facilities that the system has access to, and then just narrow the iPad to that particular use.
Courtney.
I went to see Oppenheimer this week at an AMC theater. And as I had my ticket as a QR code and a barcode. And so I went to go in to be checked in by the ticket, normally the ticket taker, but now is the QR scanner guy. And he has trouble scanning my QR code and tries it again and tries it again. And I look at the device he's holding and I said, "What, are you using an iPhone?" And he says, "Oh, no, it's even older. It's an iPod Touch." So AMC Theaters has written a custom interface for the old iPod Touch with a smaller screen, about that big a screen, to use to do their barcode scanning for ticket entry. So take all those old iPod Touches down to AMC. They'll probably press them into service because they need some that work.
Absolutely. Jeffrey Powers.
Yeah, kiosks are perfect for a lot of older iPads because they don't need that much, and they already got the software, as Courtney said. They probably already have the software written. Anything that stay away from any banking application or anything like that on your older iPad for sure. But the other thing is you can also send them off. There's a couple companies that actually turn them into iPad art. So unless you want to do it yourself, you basically take it apart, put it on a board, discard properly of the battery, and then you could have something nice on your wall that you could actually set up so it would work.
And finally, John Preto, I have 28 seconds for you.
David, you set all those up, you create a click farm, and then Paul hires you to upvote his questions in Mukana.
Oh, there you go. That's a whole, I never thought about that strategy, but that, yeah, will be interesting. Thank you all for all of your first hour participations. We are getting ready for our transition, and we have a little time cue that's coming up that I'm going to do my best to hit. IBC is our topic. We're going to spend a good amount of time coming up at IBC on the show floor and doing other things. We have a little prepared piece of content for you to watch here. It'll be coming up in a couple of seconds. It's coming up next week in Amsterdam at the Rai Auditorium. We'll have live team coverage right there. So let's roll the video and you can see.
European members of the Office Hours community are heading to the International Broadcast Convention in the Rai Center in Amsterdam to bring you the latest broadcast trends and technologies to Office Hours live from the exhibition floor. Join us on the 16th of September for the latest trends in broadcasting technologies, and this year we are especially focusing on finding solutions for your production problems. Let us know what you would like to see, what problems you need to be solved, over on officehours.global/IBC.
Welcome back to our second hour of Office Hours. Today, we're focusing on your general questions. Let's get back into the question. Mitchell, what do we have next?
Coming up next, Paul Wallace from Austin, Texas is asking, Globalstar signed a $64 million deal with SpaceX to launch satellites for Apple's emergency SOS iPhone feature in 2025. What do you think?
This is an interesting question. I haven't paid a ton of attention to it. Courtney?
I haven't. I think I read an article about it. It's a less dense constellation than, of course, they're using for Musk's Skylink. But it is, and I think it's just primarily for lower bandwidth messages, text messages only, rather than communications itself. They have it now through Skylink, through a deal that they have now. But Globalstar, I think, has made the deal with Apple to provide a more consistent one, although I don't think it has the kind of range and coverage that current Skylink is. It's a much lower number of satellites than the constellation that Skylink has.
Bill?
Yeah, it was interesting. I read a story. They've rolled out the feature, this kind of emergency SOS feature, and one of the things that allows you to do is put in just very, very basic text. You know, the phone often knows where it is because it's geo-connected. So I remember reading the story of somebody who was hiking and ran into a serious medical emergency, and they were way outside of they're in the middle of nowhere, basically. And in fact, their phone had no connectivity at all whatsoever, but he did the most brilliant thing, I thought. He typed in this emergency message that will only work when it can see a cell tower, and then he connected his phone. And for some reason, he had helium balloons with him, and he literally sent the phone up till it got high enough over the mountains he was surrounded with, and it auto-sent the text, because text will store in your phone until it gets a connection. And they managed to save him and I think somebody else who had run into the same problem on their trail. The reason I'm saying this is that having a global system that can reach into modern cell phones and protect people in cases of very serious disaster or emergencies. Just seems like it's a really cool thing. So I'm glad Apple is pursuing this. I would hope that others do the same thing and that they can roll this out across all phones in the future. But it was interesting that the text message was the right thing to do. And as I understand it, Apple's emergency SOS only allows you a limited text, but that might be the difference between life and death in some circumstances. So that's pretty cool.
Next question.
Next one in from Morgan Price in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. I'm creating an audio drama for my son's birthday. What is your approach to mastering? I've seen that people render, then master the audio. Is that still done, or should I master in the main DAW file?
Mitchell?
If I understand your question correctly, you're producing the production inside a DAW, and that's usually some kind of mezzanine format or something particular to the DAW. You don't commit until you save it or export it. If you're exporting from that file, you can export as many different versions of it, WAV, MP3, whatever, from the DAW itself. But I wouldn't commit a lossy format to the DAW master, because if you need to come back to it, you're stuck with compressing and then uncompressing it again. It's a mess.
Yes. Next question.
Håkan Foss from Stockholm, Sweden. Any suggestion on how to use pre-installed SMPTE fiber at a venue so I don't have to run my own LC single mode fiber? Parts needed.
I'm sorry, Laura.
Go ahead, Bill.
It's just, I was thinking, Alex has talked about this a little bit, and I guess terminating fiber is not as simple as terminating copper, which most of us learned how to do along the way. It is not impossible. There are kits for the proper terminations so that you can plug fiber into a venue system. Now, I would certainly talk to the venue ahead of time and find out what kind of fiber connections they are providing you there. They may have already split out the fiber into traditional, for example, audio and XLR and or video and BNC and things like that. Those standards have been around for a long time, so it may not turn out to be as difficult as you think. But on the other hand, you may need to attach jumper fiber cables between you and the process. So I would just communicate very distinctly with the facility well in advance and make sure that you test it and you have the signals you expect before you show up. Finding out you have everything except one small tool that you need that makes the whole thing fail is never a good look.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, usually a venue, I've done a number of jobs where venues have fiber connections that come out in link boxes that are, available on stage or in green rooms, things like that. And the venue has always had a set of adapter boxes to go from fiber to SDI or audio. So they have boxes for each. So check with the venue, because they probably have a means of converting it to whatever signal you're trying to tie for the tie lines between let's say the projection booth and the stage. So check with them, because they'll probably have the adapters to carry your signal digitally or even over analog.
Bill, you want to jump back in on this?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that doesn't mean that they won't kit you for $100 an hour for that box. Venues are notorious for making money on everything that they provide for you. So make sure you talk about costs with them as you're trying to get this organized.
Yes, communication is always very key when working with a venue. I know Alex has told stories of different times of, how important having that person at the venue that you communicate with is. Next question.
From Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. Can Clubhouse recapture the magic it once had, or is it a fleeting moment driven in part by global circumstance?
Go ahead, Bill.
My answer is going to be B. I think Clubhouse had its shot, and I'm not sure it will ever get to be get the mind share that it had for a while. It seemed like it was a real interesting thing, but the implementation and what they managed to do kind of showed me they weren't really ready to scale as needed back then. And I don't think Clubhouse is different enough now to provide anybody with a compelling reason to try to go back in. Most people have chat functions, which was basically what Clubhouse integrated, just a group chat kind of guided by whoever had the channel open at the time. But I think there are just so many options for that. In fact, we had just that question a few minutes ago that even Roblox for the kids is talking about doing some form of video chat in there. So almost every social media site now has connectivity between individual users. So my suspicion in the pit of my stomach is they kind of missed their moment, but we'll see.
Jeffrey?
So a couple days ago, they announced that they were going to turn into an audio messaging app, which would definitely give them a different light in what they're doing. Yeah, X has already got the Clubhouse feel in their audio, and of course they got a bigger user base that will do that. There are still a lot of people that love Clubhouse, still use Clubhouse. So as long as there's a active fan base that's in a number over, let's just say about 100 million, I think that they'll be able to move. And of course, with the audio messaging, if you have an alternative to Facebook messaging and WhatsApp, then people are going to start to use it a little bit more, because some people steer away from those apps because of the Meta, basically owned by Mark Zuckerberg. So it's a great alternative if it comes to light. I never see anything or say any company is going to be out for the count. I thought Snapchat was going to die a long time ago, and they're still going. If they find the right thing, the right groove, the right niche, they could go on for years.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Oh, MySpace, move over, make room for Clubhouse to the abandoned dustbin of abandoned social media platforms.
Yeah. The one group that I thought it was very interesting went to Clubhouse very early and is, from what I know, still active, was the National Federation for the Blind. Does a lot of their stuff on Clubhouse because it was easy, and where Zoom has a video component, they prefer just the audio only but the accessibility on that app was not amazing, which I really thought was kind of a catch-22 there. Jeffrey, you want something jump back in?
Yeah, and as you're saying that, I was talking about X earlier. My X with X, I think Elon's trying to privatize a lot of stuff, and ultimately to get your money to get into and use all their apps. So if X decides that that's a firewall, a paywall issue, or a paywall feature, then a lot of people will probably jump over to Clubhouse and go from there. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The accessibility is there's only so much you can do on a phone. And if they kind of open up their senses a little bit and actually create things like a desktop app, that could probably give them more life.
Yeah, the voiceover experience with Clubhouse on an iPhone is just not great. I've heard several people tell me that it was just really clunky, and it hasn't gotten much better from what I've been told. Next question.
Chester Sweeney III from Las Vegas, Nevada has a question. What kind of DVD burner and player should I get for my Mac Mini M2 to back up Logic-made music or watch Parks and Recreation and get smart DVDs?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
There are as Bill would say, plethora of external DVD USB devices out there. My personal favorite are Plexstore. But you didn't put a price limit on this, so I'll go to the top end. Plexstore being my favorite, especially if you're ripping music and things like that.
Bill?
If you didn't talk about authoring, if you just want to burn something, Apple makes a drive that I'm sure has been updated consistently to work with Mac Minis or all the Mac lines. I bought one back when I still needed to work with DVDs. I haven't had it out of its box in probably 5 years, maybe longer than that. But they do have a basic Apple DVD burner player that works just fine.
Courtney?
Well, I was going to recommend this LG, which is what I use, which I like. But then I went and looked at the specs, and it says Windows only, Windows XP. It's a Blu-ray burner. External, works over USB-A or USB-C. LG does make some. Look for one and see if you can find one that's Mac compatible to do your backup on, that connects over USB-C.
Next question.
Håkan Flores from Stockholm, Sweden. Any suggestions on how to communicate to commentators from an OB van in addition to audio comms?
Bill, you wanted to jump in on this?
Yeah, the traditional way, I think, if you don't use comms, use walkie-talkies. That's, typically there's an if comms goes down, you need some sort of backup. And most of the time I've seen the modest Motorola-style walkie-talkies for a second form of communication out to field operators. The big advantage of that is that you can easily cover almost any set in terms of the walkie-talkies will make it a half a mile or whatever you need. They're not as flexible as a comm system where you're on all the time and you have PLs and you have all sorts of things that you can make a better and more robust show on. But a little walkie-talkie that has 5 channels can back it up in a pinch.
Yeah. I know here we use Unity for the show, and it's just kind of interesting to see. I previously worked retail where we had the walkie-talkies, and it's just so interesting to see how something similar can actually go global. And it's a really there's so many things about this show that you just sit there and go, wow, they did what? But yeah, they're similar, but the function and the features are very different between the two. Next question.
And it's the last one on deck. Paul Wallace from Austin, Texas. eBay is rolling out a new AI tool for marketplace sellers that can generate a product listing from a single photo. It's available in eBay app for iOS to start, with the Android app to follow.
John?
No surprise here. Courtney said it best this week. AI is going to be ubiquitous. It's going to be everywhere. Remember GPT 3 launched in 2020? And a lot of these apps have been used via the API for 3 years now. So Jasper, Rightly, Grammarly, all of those have been using ChatGPT under the covers via the API. So this is the integration, and you're going to see they're doing it on Amazon. They're going to do it on eBay. They're going to do it everywhere.
Wow. Yes. So we've come to the end of another Saturday. I want to thank the panel for being here with us today on a Saturday. The producers whose questions without the show would not be possible. Our show runs on your questions. And also the back end crew. A small village lights up 7 days a week, 366 days a year, 365 most years to make this show happen. And it's amazing, from the management team, Josh, Roy, Simon, through our crew that's here with us, and the planning, the councils. There's a lot that goes into making this a show. So the Tulalip Traversal today, we went 69,000 miles, 111,000 kilometers. That's more than 550 million bananas for scale. Let's jump into After Hours.
Better do a little more barbecuing.
Going to go see the Barbie movie and cue it up.
Wow.
I recommend it.
Barbecuing, not
Thanks,
barbecuing.
everybody.
Was
Thank
better
you.
than I expected by far. I had a great time.
Especially the poorly treated Barbie, Kate McKinnon's.
Kate
I don't want
McKinnon
to.
was.
I don't want to be caught going there by myself.
Find a friend.
Yeah,
There weren't. It's PG-13, so there's not a lot of little kids.
Right.
Let's go, Barbie.
It's a much better movie than it had any right to be. That's my final review of it.